Hello, hello. This is Derek from One River Tea and from Tao Teaware. Welcome back to another episode of Tea Soup, a podcast all about tea culture, life in modern China, and Chinese tea. I'm your host, Derek Poskin. I've been living in China since 2016, and I've been drinking, buying, and selling Chinese tea for the past decade. So, pop on that kettle, heat up your teaware, and let's get this session started. All right, so real quick, what I mentioned in the intro, I'm also half of Tao Teaware. So we have One River Tea, where I sell all the Chinese teas. That's me, Alex, and Xiaoyan, forming a cooperative, the One River Tea Cooperative. And if you listen to the past two episodes, you kind of know what the cooperative entails, what our mission behind it is, and kind of the altruistic drive that we're working for. But we're focused on Chinese tea. The other side of this is the Chinese Teaware, and that's another company I started with my friend Dart, who I also met in China. And we do the Chinese teaware, the history of Chinese teaware, and a lot of connecting with Chinese potters in China, and then also Western potters in America and stuff like that, also doing these gaiwans and Chinese teapots. We recently also started another podcast. This is an entirely video podcast, right now only on YouTube, called Between the Cracks. I'll link to that in the description here. But that's more a conversation base between me and Dart. We talk about the genesis, the origin of Tao Teaware, what we're doing every week and stuff like that. And then we have a few topics that we kind of talk about. In the future, I think Dart will bring on other guests, some American potters, and some people with some really cool experiences to share. So be sure, if you like tea and teaware content, hop over to YouTube and check out Between the Cracks. That's on the Tao Teaware YouTube channel. And yeah, we'll do that every week, I think, as well. So welcome back to a regular traditional episode of Tea Soup that involves just me, just Derek, talking and telling you stories about sourcing tea in China, traveling through the lands of mountains and rivers, and encountering all these unique people. As I mentioned earlier, I've been living in China since 2016, but I've been learning Chinese since maybe 2014. A couple more years there. But I did study Chinese language and culture in university. In fact, that was my undergraduate, East Asian languages and cultures with an emphasis in China. And I'm really into the Chinese culture, the history, the poets, and the language. And so coming here and traveling through China, sourcing tea, I have a different perspective than a lot of other tea vendors do, a lot of other tea sourcers do. A lot of other people, Westerners coming to China, don't have the perspective I have, because I see it for its ancient history, and I see it for the lands and the poets, the landscapes the poets write about. And so when I get up onto these mountain ranges and I see mountains receding into mist in the distance, I'm just thinking of the scrolls and the poems. And I sit there and I think of ancient poems in my head, and I'm like, this is the land that the poets wandered in, thousands of years ago. So anyways, one of the areas I lived in that I grew to love is down south in Guangdong. Guangdong is the province that contains Guangzhou and Shenzhen, right across the border from Hong Kong. If you go all the way to the east, almost on the border of Fujian, you get to Chaozhou. And this region is what I love. This is the home of the Dancong Oolongs. And I lived there for just about a year. But I've also traveled there almost every year in spring, sometimes spring and autumn, meeting with the Dancong Oolong tea makers in the mountains outside of the city. And so I've traveled through those mountains. I've ridden motorcycles up to the very peaks of them. I've met with the potters, lived with, drank and eat with the tea makers and the potters, stay up late at night with them. I've slept in the tea makers' rooms for like a whole week while they're just busy all night. And I'm just like, I can't keep up with them. I'm like, I need to crash, because I'll get into this in the next episode. Making Dancong Oolong is one of the most complicated processes I've ever seen in the tea world. The tea makers need to really stay up almost all night until like 3 or 4 a.m. And then they wake up around like 7 or 8 in the next morning. And so these guys are busy for a whole month. And I love going down there in spring and doing my best to kind of compete with them, stay up with them, and keep them company and kind of build this guanxi, or relationship, if you will. Naturally, during that time, while I'm keeping them company, I'm learning so much about how to process Dancong, how to drink Dancong, their take on the different varietals, what they think makes a good tea, what's not a good tea, why is it not a good tea, what part of the process went wrong, was it the weather when it was picked, was it the kill green, was it the withering, a lot of these things, they can just taste a tea and tell you exactly where it could have been better. And so that's what I really love. And in this episode, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you guys up to Wudong Mountain. This is Wudong Shan. This is the mecca of Dancong Oolong, where Dancong Oolong first began. On this mountain, this volcanic mountain, ex-volcano. It's not a volcano right now, but it has a lot of volcanic soil. In fact, Wudong means the dark soil mountain, and it's a reference to this very unique kind of terroir in that area, and this huge mountainous volcanic boulders you see just dotting the landscape up there. So this is the origin of Dancong Oolong, where you get the oldest trees, the mother bushes, and this is really when people in the past were talking about Dancong Oolong. It was all from this mountain. And then as it got more popular, people from other mountains started growing it. And so when you're really sourcing Dancong, if you can get some Wudong Dancong Oolong, that's the cream of the crop. That's the best of the best. But of course, and maybe I've mentioned this before, I've expressed this idea, it can often be faked. A lot of people will just, I buy tea from random places and it says Wudong on the box, and I know it's not from Wudong. And it says Wudong Tea Company, and it's like, okay, like, yes, maybe you have a little plot of land in Wudong, but you also have plots of land elsewhere, and I'll get into this later as well, just the land breakdown of the region. But let's back up a little bit, because right now it is August 25th, and so it's late August, and it's been about 4 months since the close of the picking and processing season of Dancong Oolong in spring. And only right now am I seeing the full range of properly charcoal roasted Dancong Oolongs from my producers. And so it's taken 4 months for their spring tea to be ready after picking. And this, when I first started sourcing Dancong Oolong, these kinds of production dates confused the living hell out of me because I could not make sense of it. I would go up to the mountains in spring and I would see them making tea. And I'm like, can I buy this tea? And they're like, right now, no, but it's not ready yet. And I'm like, well, it smells good, it tastes good. At this phase, this was the Mao Cha. And the Mao Cha is drinkable tea. It's dried tea, it's been produced, but it hasn't been charcoal roasted. And so they'll say, like, no one wants to really actually sell Mao Cha unless you're going to be roasting it, unless you're going to jiagong, and I'll go over all these terms later, unless you want to jiagong or tanbei. Jiagong is taking out all of the huangpian, the yellow leaves, the old leaves. Tanbei is the charcoal roasting process. In their mind, the Mao Cha is undrinkable, and which is interesting because in the past, if you've followed me for a long time, you know that I have sold Mao Cha for the Dancong Oolong, and I feel like this is a really educational insight into the production process of Dancong, what it tastes like before it's charcoal roasted, the snapshot of it after it's processed in spring. But again, it used to confuse the daylight out of me because I would go up in the mountain and I would try and buy tea and they wouldn't sell it to me. And I'm like, are we not friends? Do you not like me? And so they would either sell me the Mao Cha, which is the unprocessed tea, and they'd say, like, drink this in the next month because it's going to change and not be good. And full disclosure, I've had Mao Cha, I've aged Mao Cha, and it turns out really nice. It changes so much and gets more and more complex. And so their idea is that it doesn't live up to the what is quote-unquote Dancong Oolong, but it is lovely tea in itself. So in the past, in the spring, I've bought the Mao Cha, or they've sold me some charcoal roasted tea that they've finished from last year. And they give it just a real quick bake, and then they sell it to me. And they're like, okay, this is last year's tea, but it's charcoal roasted. This is what you want. The other side is they'll sell me a tea that they just bake really quickly, and so they don't charcoal roast it. And so in the past, I've gone through all of these different phases of releasing, okay, this is the Mao Cha, this is the wood baked stuff, this is last year's roasted tea. And then this year, I just didn't do any of that. This year, I've waited patiently, despite people flooding my inboxes asking me where are the Dancongs. I've waited until they're actually all done, and it's taken a lot of restraint. And right now, in August 25th, they're finally done. And so let's talk a little bit about the dates of the picking, the processing, and stuff like that. I'll go into the full how to make Dancong in the next episode. This episode, I really just want to tell you why I'm obsessed with Dancong right now, 4 months after its processing, after its initial processing. So, when does Dancong Oolong season begin? That's where we'll start. If you remember way back that episode, I think it was episode 8, I go into the agricultural calendar for China, and that's they split the whole year up into 24 2-week stems or terms. And this is kind of how we'll orient ourselves with the production of Dancong Oolong, because Dancong Oolong typically begins right around the Qingming festival or maybe a week before it. Some of the earlier cultivars right now happen just before the Qingming solar term, which falls around April 4th. And so when I'm there, sometimes I see them start harvesting some of the early cultivars like the Xingran Shang and the Milan Shang as early as late March. And usually that's when I see it begin. And they start picking, they start processing, and they start making their teas up to the state of Mao Cha. And that picking production season usually goes on essentially a whole month until late April, maybe around April 20th is kind of like the peak right before the end. And then everything should be done really by May. And so you really just have most of April is just Dancong production where they're picking the teas and they're making it to the point of Mao Cha. Now, after they make the teas up to the Mao Cha phase, what you have is a lot of stems, a lot of larger leaves, last year leaves that were picked in addition with this early spring buds, and that needs to get sorted out. Now, there are machines that can sort out the teas. I've seen them used quite effectively, and this is considerably lowering the cost of some of the cheaper Dansongs, which is good, right, for a lot of people, because we don't need somebody with their human hands to look at the leaves and pick out every single larger leaf and stem. That's extra work. In fact, in Chinese, it's called jia gong, which means to add work. And so this added process of sorting the Mao Cha is still done by a lot of people, especially for the higher quality teas. But there are mechanized means of doing this, especially for the mass-produced teas and stuff like that. And this process can take several days for, a few kilograms of tea. It's incredibly time-consuming. And if you go to the Phoenix Village, if you go to Wudong, Swun, on the Wudong Mountains, you'll see people all through spring. Usually the older ladies, the aunties gossiping, talking, picking out all the yellow leaves and stems from the teas. This is the jiagong phase. After this phase, the Mao Cha is still considered Mao Cha because it hasn't been roasted. It's just been jiagong. The next part of jiagong is to charcoal roast it. This charcoal roasting phase can take several months because what you want to do is you want to put the tea in a bamboo basket over a pile of kind of dormant coals, like hot coals that are coated in ash. You want the internal tea of the temperature to be somewhere between 90 degrees Celsius if you're doing for a light bake, and then 110 degrees Celsius if you want a heavy bake. And you do that anywhere between 12 and 18 hours. And then what you do is you take it off of the heat and you let it cool. You let it cool down and rest for maybe 10 to 14 days. And so if you're thinking about this, you need 2 weeks of rest for each bake. For traditional Dancong Oolong, you want 3 bakes. And so that's at least a month and a half if all you're doing is roasting and resting and roasting and resting. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of producers don't have any time in spring to do anything other than making the new teas. And so really we can't start making charcoal roasting the tea until May. And so May, June, the earliest really we're going to see it is mid-June to late June. And that's really, if they're just really, really focused, all they're doing is making tea and dedicating their entire lives to it and time to it, that's a lot of work. Usually what happens is we see it right around the Dragon Boat Festival. That's when you see the final finished charcoal roasted teas first starting to appear on the market. This year, the Dragon Boat Festival fell on June 22nd. So again, that's exactly the time frame I'm talking about. That's the earliest time you're going to start seeing them. But usually, people will wait until Mid-Autumn Festival to really release the full range of their Dancong Oolongs. And this year, the Mid-Autumn Festival falls on September 29th. And so, although it's, August and I say, It's been 4 months since they finished their tea. We're looking about a half a year from the start of production to the finish of production. And what's really cool, as you saw, I organized all of these based on solar terms and festivals, right? I did the Mid Autumn Festival is when it's done. The Dragon Boat Festival is when you first start seeing the charcoal roasted teas. And then the Qingming Festival is when harvest really begins. Another way to look at this in more secular terms is the vernal equinoxes. Vernal equinox, summer solstice, autumnal equinox. This is the beginning of harvest season, the beginning of seeing finished teas, and then the full range of all finished Dancong oolongs. And so it really fully occupies half a year for the tea makers. And while they're really, really busy that 1 month, they're still working the rest of the year. So hopefully that shines some light on the often misunderstood harvest dates, production dates, availability dates of fresh Dancong Oolong. I think another linear comparison to make is the Wuyan cha. The Wuyan cha is another roasted Oolong from very close in Fujian, Wuyishan. This also has, a May harvest season, late May or late April, early May harvest season, and then you don't see the finished teas until like September. Of course, they have a deeper roast, a heavier roast, but again, this time frame for roasted oolong is what we should be expecting for Dancong as well. All right, so now let's start making our way up to the Wudong mountain, as sourcing Wudong tea is the purpose of this episode, and this is the first year I've actually sourced tea from Wudong, and there are a lot of reasons for this. One is I am a little bit, and Alex is too, a bit naturally against the status quo, kind of anti-establishment. And so when we see something that says like, oh, the finest teas in the world come from this region, we're like, oh, that's BS. Like, let's find really awesome tea from elsewhere and then promote that. And so we always kind of trying to undermine the status quo and undermine what people think is good and show them other opportunities of what is good. So I've always kind of sourced off-kilter Dancong oolongs, off-kilter teas, and you'll see this in a lot of our sourcing techniques. Our Lao pu'er tea instead of like the Yiwu pu'er tea and stuff like that. But anyways, this is the first year I went to Wudong Mountain, and I hate to say it, I think the Wudong teas are great. They stand up to their reputation. If you can get real tea from Wudong, it's really on another level. It's hard to compare it with other teas that aren't from Wudong. Honestly, I was not expecting it, but that's my assessment, and I'll kind of show you why I believe that now. In the past episodes, if you didn't listen to the previous episodes on Chaozhou Dancong Oolong, you might want to go back and listen to them. I believe they're episodes 16 and 17, and that'll give you a deeper understanding of tea production in this region, the people I've worked with in the past, and really just set the stage for what we're going to be talking about in this episode. And so, as I mentioned, I've talked a lot about the farmers I've met in the Phoenix Mountains outside of the city of Chaozhou. And real quickly, I want to kind of express why I called that one sourcing Phoenix Dancong, and this one I call sourcing Wudong Dancong. Because a lot of people say Dancong oolong tea comes from the Phoenix Mountains, and this is true, but the Phoenix Mountains are a massive chain of mountains outside of Chaozhou that really encompass a huge variety of land and terroirs and processing techniques and stuff like that, where if you say Wudong Mountain, that's a singular mountain. And so we see this with the Wuyi Mountains. The Wuyi Mountains are kind of a range, but there is a core region within there. And so the Wudong Mountain is the core region, the Zhengyan of the Phoenix Mountains. So in the past episode, I mentioned a lot of other producers with land not on the Wudong Mountain or very close, like on the slopes. So we have Liao and Shaozhang. They have a garden in Da'an. Da'an is just a little north of the Wudong Mountain. It's still kind of in the range, on the slopes and whatnot. And their tea is beautiful. Their garden is fantastic. They have the 1,000 acres of ancient tree reservation, and they have a small portion, a few sections within there. Wei has a garden just a little further down the mountain by the reservoir, by the Fengxi Reservoir. in the village of Juliao. And he has a few gardens that are really high elevation and then a few gardens that are closer to the reservoir. And so he has a range of tea qualities as well. We see Xie, his family has a small plot of land really far out in the nether regions of the Phoenix Mountains. And yeah, he has a very small garden. I think it's like 30 mu, which is absolutely tiny. And then we have the Huiwei Cooperative or collaboration of friends who have gardens all throughout the Phoenix Village nearby regions. Now, one thing that drove me crazy when I was trying to understand this that I'm only now understanding is why do these people have so many different gardens at different elevations in different areas? At first, I thought they were messing with me. They're like, oh, I have a garden over here, and I have a garden over here, and none of their gardens are connected. And I'm like, you know what? Why don't you just have one plot of land that is your plot of land? And so this goes back into history, which we covered, I think, in the previous two episodes. But primarily, episode 18 is when we talk about the Land Reformation Acts in Hubei. We saw the same thing happen here in the Phoenix Village in Chaozhou. And so, without getting too in depth, what really happened is in the Maoist era, in the 50s and 60s, all the village land was organized into communes, into collectives. And so every village was owned by the collective, owned by the community, and then people were organized into different production teams that were growing the tea, making the tea, harvesting the land and stuff like that. And then this kind of dissolved with the death of Mao in the late 70s, 79, 80s, and with the new Land Reformation Act in early 80s. This is when we see the land split up. And so what happens is the collectives kind of disappear, and now the land is given back to the individual peoples. But it's kind of unfair to give somebody really, really nice land and somebody really, really poor land. And so what they did is they ranked all the lands, A, B, C, D, and then they gave everybody a little bit of A, B, D, and C just based on their production levels, the size of their households, their age, their abilities, their labor points, and whatnot. And so a lot of people just have this random mix. They'll have like an ancient tree in their land, and they're like, all right, I got one of the mother bushes. And then they'll have a bunch of just swampland or like mire land down by the river. And so this is why a single producer will have an ancient garden, a mid garden, and kind of like a low level garden and different grades of tea. When I first encountered this, I thought, I was being taken advantage of because there's a high mountain farmer and he's like, yeah, I have cheaper tea if you want cheaper tea. And I'm like, why do you have cheaper tea? And he's like, it's lower mountain. And I'm like, oh, so you're just buying low mountain tea and selling it to me? And it's like, no, it's my tea as well. And I'm like, okay, of course, you have every type of tea. And now I realize it is just because of a product of that kind of temporary measure of the Land Redistribution Act in the 80s, because it was initially done as just a temporary measure, and they're like, okay, we'll redistribute the land every 7, 12 years or something like that. But what happened is they never redistributed it. And so what was just a temporary measure in the 80s became fixed forever. Like I was talking to Wei, and Wei is like, this land is my land. I will give it to my kids. And so in his mind, he owns it. It's his and his family for forever. And one very interesting thing about a lot of the rural agricultural land right now in China is you're not allowed to rent it, lease it, sell it, trade it. And so this is one of the things that was implemented in the 80s with the Land Redistribution Act to fix everything. Because what they don't want to do is they don't want one entrepreneurial person coming in and just buying all the land, renting all the land, and becoming this mega rich boss. What they want to do is they want to keep everyone kind of at the same level. And the only way to kind of get around this is to create cooperatives. And some people will create proxy cooperatives and just give the villagers, a dividend every year, but just essentially effectively lease all of their land and kick them off the land. And I talked to one farmer or one ex-farmer in Taimushan, and he was super thrilled about this. The Lu Shuiya collective came and leased all his village's land, and now he gets, 10,000 kuai every year for doing nothing. And it's like, it works sometimes. But what's really interesting, again, is sometimes you'll see fields that are just really good land laid fallow. Like nobody's harvesting, no one's doing anything with it, and it's because the people who own that land moved away from the village, and no one else can technically buy that land, lease it, use it. They can't sell it either. And so you'll see some of this, pirate farming where people utilize whatever fallow land they find and stuff like that. But anyways, just weird consequences of this Land Redistribution Act and just the really complicated truth behind what it means to be a tea farmer in China. And so let's get back to the story of my time in Chaozhou this spring. So as I said, I've been sourcing Dancong tea for the past 6 years. I've been going to Chaozhou every year for the past 5, 6, maybe 7 years because I was really on my bucket list for where I wanted to go when I got to China. And actually, Dancong is one of the reasons I started sourcing Chinese tea in general because it was my first love of Chinese tea. And so it was always top tier of what I wanted to do, my goals here in China. And so I've been there, I've been to Wudong Shan before, but I've never actually sourced Wudong teas. And so this year was the first year I went there with the plan to source Wudong teas because when you have farmers who've been working with farmers for a few years, it's kind of like being in a relationship where they don't want you to cheat on them with other farmers, especially if they're doing the same teas. And so when I am looking around, I have to be a little incognito, inconspicuous about it. I don't post about where I am. I don't let them know that I'm there until I want to meet them. This year I went down to Chaozhou because a friend of a friend, my Kemin Laosher, my ceramic teacher, he introduced me to a friend who wanted to shoot a video about, Chaozhou culture, and he wanted me to be involved with it. But this is right around April 4th, right around Qingming Jie, and so I was planning on going to Hangzhou and Suzhou and look for all of these really nice Mingqian, Biluochun, and Longjing teas, especially because we had already done the pre-sale. But he was really, really pushing me to come to Chaozhou, and so eventually I sorted everything out with the Dragonwell and the Biluochun guys, bought the teas, and I went down to Chaozhou against my better judgment, and it turned out to be a bad call because in Chaozhou it was raining that week. It was really bad, and we spent 3 or 4 days not doing anything, and I was kicking myself about it. But eventually he takes me up the mountain to Wudong, the Wudong Shan, and it's I think like 45-minute drive out of the city of Chaozhou, and it's also 15-25 minutes away from the Phoenix Village. And so a lot of people say the Phoenix Village when they talk about Dancong teas, but that's really just another jumping off point where you, even at the Phoenix Village, you have to go deeper into the mountains. And so you go from Chaozhou out into the mountains to the Phoenix Village. And then you go from the Phoenix out into the mountains to the smaller villages like the Wudong Sun, Da'an, Julio Sun. And so when he's taking us there, I actually see all of my producers, like their production fields and gardens, and I know where they are. I'm like, oh, we're passing through Julio Sun right now. We're passing through the Phoenix Village. And like, this is where Wei has his garden, stuff like that. And it's really cool because we just get higher and higher. And I'm like, oh, I've never gone this far down on this road before. And eventually it's like it turns into like a single lane road where you have to kind of honk around corners, stop and wait for cars to come by. It gets more and more trafficked because the popularity of this area has grown up, but everything is so narrow, the roads on the mountain cliffs, that they're not able to expand it. And so getting off of this mountain was a nightmare. But he takes us all the way up to the Wudong Sun, the Wudong village. And here in this village, it's like a Ziran Sun, like a natural village. Almost everyone who's lived here for a long time, their clan name is Wen. And so if you meet like a maker from the Wudong village and their name is Wen, you know you got the right guy. And we saw this down in the Phoenix Village. There's like a Lin clan where everyone's named Lin. And this is, as we'll talk about the land redistribution acts and everything, after the communes dissolved, they redistributed the land amongst the teams. And so this is like the Wen team, the Wen clan that was like living up in Wudong village. They got a lot of this Wudong land just because it was where they were stationed at. So we get up to the mountain. It's still raining, and it has been raining like unbearably wet for the past week. And so we get into, he introduces me to his maker, who he's buying tea from because he has a tea company as well. He sells it in Dongguan. That's my friend of a friend. This is the guy who's showing me around, who wanted me to shoot the video. This is the guy he buys Wudong tea from, and his name is Wen Zitong. Wen Zitong is He's about like 21, I think 22. He looks really young. And he's sitting behind the tea table making tea for everyone, talking about the yield, talking about this, talking about that. And his father's pretty old, at least looks pretty old, probably like 60s, mid 60s. And he's passing on the trade to Wen Zitong, his son. And I asked Wen Zitong, because he looks so young, I was like, oh, like, are you your father's apprentice and everything? And he's like, I have my own apprentices. I am the tea master here. And he said it very, very clearly with a little bit of sass and like, listen, you come into my tea house and call me the apprentice, I'm the tea master. And so it's really interesting to see this attitude. And drinking the teas, he was making some Alfu Ho, and I drank the Alfu Ho, and I was just absolutely blown away. I'm somebody I've drank Dancong teas for the past decade. It was my heart and calling to come to China and source. I've been sourcing it, drinking so many of them. I lived in Chaozhou for a whole year and drank, more than my body weight worth of tea. And this is one of the best teas, one of the best Dancong oolongs I've ever had. And it was the first one he was making. And I later found out it was from the mother bush that some people were buying select lots from, which is probably why it was so good. But at the same time, it had this certain level, this like sweet minerality to it that I've rarely encountered in Dancong. Usually Dancong gets a little overpowered with either the roast or the fragrance, but this one was just sweet, sweet water. I was so blown away by it. And so they wanted to go out and walk the mountain. It was raining, and I'm like, I just want to sit here and keep drinking this tea. Like, I do not want to leave this tea table. It was one of those really amazing moments that I rarely have these days just because I've had so many types of teas. This was a tea worth just putting everything on hold for. And so I was absolutely, I didn't even want to. I was kind of in a bad mood because of the rain, because my friend of a friend encouraged me to come buy a plane ticket, come down. We wasted 3 or 4 days. I didn't want to like this tea. I wanted just to be angry and go meet Master Wei. And I drank this tea and it totally changed my plans. It was one of those life-changing moments. Eventually, I capitulate to walk the mountain only because Wen Zitong is also leaving. And he's like, we'll brew more tea when we come back, I promise. And I say, okay. And so now that the tea has stopped, now we walk the mountains and we kind of see some of his old bushes, some of his mother bushes, and listen to his complaints about this tea season because it's been raining the past week. They haven't had a single harvest in the past 2 or 3 days. And Dancong is really particular. I can talk about this more in another episode, but the reason it's called Dancong is because it's harvested cultivar by cultivar. And so that's kind of, Dancong means single bush. And so they isolate it upon single cultivar production, single bush. And so right now they should be harvesting the Xingran Shang or the Judo Cai, which often go by the same name. This is the apricot kernel fragrance, the almond fragrance. This is the razor leaf fragrance. And they're supposed to be harvesting, but it's been 3 days and they can't. And so they can't harvest any of the tea, and the tea leaves are getting bigger and bigger and longer and longer. And Wen Zitong says, like, if it keeps raining for like 3 more days, we're not going to have an almond fragrance harvest this year. We'll just miss it. We'll have to move on to the next ones. And so another thing is I just bought some almond fragrance, actually, some Xingran Shang apricot kernel fragrance from Master Wei. And it's August again. So I remember what happened in spring when it was supposed to be being harvested and it was raining the whole time. This year I asked Wei for the prices, and he gives me 2 different prices for his apricot kernel fragrance. And I know immediately why. And I ask him just because I know. And I'm like, oh, why are there 2 prices this year? And he says one has too much water in it. One has too much yushui. And so the yushui is the rainy water. If it's harvested during the rainy weather, it tastes a little a little weak. And so one of his grades that he picked and harvested just wasn't up to the quality that it should be. And the other one was picked during the dry, sunny days that followed. And so that one was the higher price. Of course, I know what's going on, so I know why there are 2 prices, and I trust Wei, and so I bought the higher priced one, and it's incredible. It's better than even last year's Xingran Shang, last year's apricot kernel fragrance. So anyways, that's kind of just one of the reasons that I love being on the mountain during spring when the tea is being made, because I can see all of these kind of cause and effects. another really interesting thing about my time this spring and being on the Wudong Mountain, and I had just come from Hangzhou's West Lake. I had just come from the Dongting Mountain in Suzhou. And all of these three places, this year I went big. I went to all of the core regions when before I kind of talked about my reluctance to do so. And so I'm always looking for the off-kilter ones. So I always get like the Xishan Dao instead of the Dongting Lake for the Biluochun. This year I wanted to go to Shaoxing and get the Dafo Longjing instead of the Shihu Longjing. And so I wanted to go to an off region to get like less expensive, but still probably equally as good as, so I assumed, Dragonwell green tea. Instead, I kind of lost that opportunity and I went to Wudong Mountain instead, so another core region. And experiencing these three core regions back to back to back, I have to admit there is justification for these teas that come from the core regions because the core regions are beautiful. They're ancient, they're well maintained, they're cultivated, they've been in use for so long, and at least in the Wudong Mountains and in the Dongting Peninsula, there's a huge variety of ecology growing there that's sustained. That's nobody's been meddling with it, nobody's been messing with it, nobody's changed it in the past few centuries. And so it's really an incredible system to witness. And walking through it, even in the rain, even when there's no tea being harvested, it's like paradise. It's a whole nother world. This is, as I mentioned, it's the mecca for Dancong, and it's really worth, if you like Dancong Oolong and you come to China, it's worth making the pilgrimage to the Wudong Mountain and just walking its slopes because you'll see why this tea is different. You'll see why Wudong Dancong is different from other place Dancongs, and you'll see why Dancong in general is different from all other types of Oolongs. So we walk through the mountains and get some, great photos, glamour shots of us with the ancient tea trees. He has a few mother bushes that I was looking at my videos that I took this spring just now, and in the videos I'm whispering. I'm in awe of these trees, of this environment, and I have a hushed voice, and I'm like, why am I whispering to the camera? And it's like I have this weird sense of just this sacred sense of this land and this area and these massive trees. And I'm like, this is the Huangzhishao mother bush. Like, it's really fascinating. But again, one of those things you don't really notice until you're there, until you witness it in person. And so we leave the mountain, come back down, drink more teas, and I'm equally impressed with all of the other teas that aren't even the mother bush production. I'm just really impressed with Wen Zitong's production skills and then the quality of the tea and the terroir. And so then it's time. My friend of a friend and the camera guys are going down the mountain, and I'm like getting ready to go. And then Wen Zitong's like, "Oh, you're leaving so soon?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, I have no other way off the mountain." And he's like, "Well, why don't you just stay here in my room for the next couple days because tomorrow we're making tea." And I was like, "Great tea, great environment, new producer." Yes. And I'm like, okay, I'll stay here. I didn't even have to be like, well, that's too generous of an offer. That's so kind. And I was like, nope, I will stay in your room and eat your food, please. Please, please, please. And so, so I sleep on a mattress in Wen Zitong's bedroom and get to know him a lot more. And I just accompany him for the next few days when he's making the tea in the morning, when he's killing the green, when he's doing the yaoqing and everything. And I'm learning his methods and seeing that his methods are different from my other producers. He has this very clear idea of what needs to happen when. Master Wei also has this. I mean, he's been doing it for so long, but Wen Zitong, I kind of expected him to not have it down so well. But I learned, talking to Wen Zitong so much, he went to, college, secondary school for tea production, for tea tasting and everything. And so he has a lot of certificates, and he is actually a tea teacher in Guangzhou and stuff. And so I realized, okay, he really does know his stuff. And there's a lot about Wen Zitong being so young that I really, really admire. And I got to learn a whole lot about him because what's really funny is he actually says he doesn't really like making tea. He says it's too difficult, tai shin kula. If he could, he would do something else. And I'm just like, what? Your tea is some of the best tea I've ever had. And he's like, yeah, a lot of people say that. And a lot of people just encourage him to stay making tea. It kind of reminds me of like the philosopher kings that like only those who don't want to make tea should be making tea. I'm just kidding with that one, but it's just like he's falling into this wonderful category of people I love making tea and things that I like about tea. Like I mentioned, we're looking for things that break the mold, things that aren't common. And here we have a tea maker who's very young, who kind of has this idea that he doesn't even want to do it. And he just is an incredible savant at making tea, and he makes incredible tea. And everyone is like begging him to stay in the game and keep making tea. And it's like, I know you're young and you could move to the city and fulfill any other dreams you want to, but just please stay on this mountain in this rural village and just keep making tea, please. And so there's this sense of reluctant power. There's this sense of, prodigy status and everything. And another really cool thing that I totally admire and respect about Wen Zitong is that he is openly gay. And here in the rural mountains of China, this is incredibly rare to see. Maybe in the cities, people are a little more able to come out more openly. Of course, it's never easy kind of to be gay in such a straight culture and everything the world over. But it gets more and more difficult the more rural you get in China. And he is just very open. Everyone knows it. He has a boyfriend in Guangzhou. He's got, just a very clear, sassy attitude, and he doesn't really hide anything about his personality. And I totally respect the strength and the bravery to do this and just to be openly himself no matter where he is. And part of me is like, yeah, maybe you do need to get off this mountain and get into a big city where people can accept it a little more easily. But at the same time, the tea he's making is so phenomenal that I really, really hope he stays there. And so he invited me back the next year, and of course I'm going to go back the next year and just keep paying him company and paying him homage and buying his teas. And so this year, what we would do is we would wake up very early, like maybe not 6, but like 7 or 8, and we would do the kill green phase for the teas. Then I could walk the mountains and see the pickers harvesting the tea in the morning. Then they bring it back to the withering areas, the platforms. In Wudong Shan, there's not a lot of land because there's a lot of tea, and then the housing areas are not very big. And so people are drying teas, withering teas wherever they can on the rooftops, on their special multi-tiered buildings with like heat lamps and stuff like that. And then usually around after dinner, after evening, that's when you start doing the yaoqing, the shake wilting. And Wen Zitong just stays up drinking tea all night until about 2, 3 a.m., and maybe even later. And it's really just dependent on the tea itself. And so he's got such a commitment to the craft that he says he doesn't like making tea, but he puts his heart and soul into it. And I can tell he doesn't want to do it just because it takes too much time and too much energy from him. But I accompanied him for 3-4 days maybe, and then I had to just tap out. I'm like, I can't keep doing this. And, this is early April, and so he still had 3-4 weeks left of it. So I really just have to give a lot of respect to the tea makers in this region. The amount of time they work, the amount of energy they expend, it really is something else. I kind of talk about this in another episode later. Dancong Oolong recently has kind of risen in price over the past couple years. And while on the surface it looks like the price is being raised, in my opinion, the price is just becoming more accurate. I think in the past it was too cheap for the amount of labor going into this type of tea. I think it was just way too inexpensive. And now it's becoming a little more reasonable as far as like the amount of time these people are putting into making this tea. As we mentioned earlier, it takes half a year. And 1 month out of that year, you're staying up all night. Like you're sleeping 4 or 5 hours every single night for, 5 weeks or so. And then the rest of the time you're roasting the tea, resting the tea. At any moment you could mess up. You could over roast the tea and devalue it. And then at the other end of it, you're totally dependent on the weather conditions. If it's raining, then you have to say like, okay, like this tea has too much rainwater in it. It's not as good as it should be. I can't sell it for as much as I want to. And so you're really dependent on a lot of things as the farmer. And so I do think seeing this price rise is reasonable, is justified. And maybe that's just me hoping that if Wen Zitong can make more money doing this, he'll keep doing it because his tea is fantastic. He had 2 people from Guangzhou there They have a little tea house in Guangzhou, and they have been buying tea from him for the past 7 years, which, if he's 21, 22 now, that's when he was 15, 16 years old and started making tea. They were some of his first devoted customers because they saw the talent in the tea he was making. And they've been buying some of his older bush, some of his danju. So one thing that he does that a lot of other people don't quite do, maybe they say they do it, but I've never really seen evidence of it. He does single bush productions where he keeps track of the harvest just from one single tree, and then we'll make that into the final batch and say this is the danju, the single bush baxian. And then he'll have a few of those, and then he'll start doing sub mixes where, like, here are 3 or 4 or 5 trees of the Baxian that are all over 100 years old. They're not the mother bush, they're not the Danju bushes, but they're still very old bushes. And then he does one that's just all of the other bushes that he has on his land. And so he's very, very clear about making incredible high quality tea and keeping it isolated. And I don't see this so much in the rest of the Dancong world. And these people from Guangzhou are buying exclusively mother bush production from him. And what they do is they stay on the mountain all season. And so they've been there for 2 weeks, and they're just waiting for the huangzhishang to be harvested. And then they'll buy every leaf off of that mother bush tree. And so I was there when they were picking it, and these people are just so happy. They're good friends with Wenzitong. And they're the ones, I was drinking the teas that they were buying, the Aofuho and everything. And it was just incredible to have this experience, to drink the mother bushes, and really wonderful to meet somebody who's doing these single bush productions. And I was able to buy some single bush production of the Jianghua Shang, that's the ginger flower fragrance, and the Aofuho, which is, we translate as behind the cave. And these were prohibitively expensive, something I'm only going to sell this year because I don't want to buy it ever again. Just because it's like, I had to really dig into my own savings in order to buy these, and I'll put them up on the site just as an educational opportunity on the One River Tea website. But really, they're so expensive. I'm going to have to sell them for like $2 a gram, $2.50 a gram. And so for me, this is incredibly expensive teas. But it was my first time being able to directly, definitively, and without a doubt, source some of the highest quality single bush, mother bush productions of these 2 varietals. And I was on the mountain while they were making it, and so I saw Wenzitong take it out of the Mao Chao pile, put it in bags, write my name on it, set it aside for me. And I know that that is the tea that I got. And again, this year I spent a lot of money on the higher quality teas because I was in the right place at the right time. This is when I got the Shifeng, the Baihefeng, Longqing master-made teas. And so this year saw some of the most expensive teas that I have ever bought. And I am selling them, but very slowly. And it really takes more risk on my part for something that I think is good, but maybe not justifying the price. And this is something we can talk about later. Does the actual value translate? I feel like there is a bell curve, and when you get into this single bush, highest quality production you can possibly buy, the numbers get staggering, and the ROI, the return on your investment, is only a small amount better, a smidgen better, for a lot more money. And so I feel like there is this happy medium of very high quality teas. For Dancong, I feel like it's probably in the range of like $1 a gram. But then if you get to $2 a gram, you're going to get a higher quality tea, but it's going to be marginally better. It's gonna, if you really know Dancong, if you really understand it, then of course you'll be able to tell this is incredible tea. But if you're not really that sensitive to it, you might not even notice, but you will be spending a whole lot of money. And so this will probably be the only year I'm going to source these mother bush teas, but it was a fun experience, and we'll see, maybe next year I'll go back on this again when I visit Wenzitong. One thing that I just totally respect about Wenzitong and all of my other Dancong makers is the huge amount of memory they have about all of their teas, the incredible connection they have with this cultivar, this picking day, that picking season. They know exactly what the weather was like when it was made. And this is interesting because with the Dancong, the harvest dates are kind of split up between varietals and cultivars every week, every 2 weeks or something like that. And so if you remember, the Youhua Shang, that was in late April. And so the weather there was perfect. It was very good. Where the Xingrenshang, that had really rainy weather, but a few good days. And so the few good days I can price higher. The rainy weather I need to price lower. For the rest of the tea, for the rest of the tea world, it's usually just one type of tea in different seasons. Like for white tea, for instance, in Wudong, you have the silver needle, you have the baimudan, and the shomei, the gongmei and shomei. And within these, it's very much like 2-week season, 4-week season, 6-week season. In general, you're not looking at it day by day. You're looking at it, maybe, if you will, batch by batch. But still, the amount of detail for these Dancong producers is incredible because they have so many different varietals growing at once on their mountain. They have to be very specific about how they're harvesting, how they're processing. Different teas, different cultivars like a different processing style. And so if you're making, the Jianghua Shang, you have to remember, like, this tea is going to be a little spicy. Like, I need to make sure that I'm not making it too fragrant because it'll be almost too spicy to be palatable. So as a special gift for you tea supers, what I will do is I'll tell you the final lineup for the Dancong Oolongs I've picked this year. From Wenzatong, I have, as I mentioned, the 2 mother bush cultivars, the Hidden Cave and the Ginger Flower Fragrance. That's the Aofu Ho and the Jianghua Shang. I was on the mountain when those were being made and picked, and I was able to secure a small bag of each of those. And so I will sell them, again, it's probably going to be like $2, $2.50 a gram. I will sell them until they sell out, and I'll probably never stock mother bush stuff again just because it's prohibitively expensive. The other teas that I got from him, these are the Old Bush, the Pinpei, and so these are his Laocong, where he gets like 4 or 5 different older trees over 100 years old, and he picks them together. I got his Ba Xian, that's the 8 Immortals, his Lei Kou Chai, the Thunderstruck, the Dongfang Hong, the East is Red, and the Songjong. The Songjong is also sometimes called the Huang Shishang, and so really excited for these teas to get from him. Other teas that I got from other vendors from the Da'an region, that's the Liao and Shaojiang, up in the ancient groves of the 1,000 mu of tea trees. I got their Tiantongshan, that's the heavenly fragrance. I got their Yelaishang, the night bloom fragrance. From Wei, I got his apricot. Really, really happy about that one. And then I got a new tea. This is the pomelo flower fragrance, the Youhua Xiang. And this one I think is going to be really good. Then from Huiwei, I got actually some Milanshang that I actually really like. This is an incredibly fragrant roasted Nongshang. Nong, it means heavy, Milanshang, and it just tastes great. I just drank it while making this podcast. It's less expensive than a lot of the other teas, but I absolutely love it. Another one I got from the Huiwei, from Miss Chen, is her Qing Yashishang. And so this is the lightly roasted Yashishang. It's still 2 or 3 times charcoal roasted, and so it still tastes great. I'm taking the photos, drinking the teas, doing the tasting notes right now, and so I should be able to have them released next week, Friday, towards the end of August, actually probably the first day of September is really when I'm going to do the release. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for your interest in tea soup and all things Chinese tea. This is your host, Derek Poskin from One River Tea, signing off until next time. Brew happy, guys.